The two key drivers I think that are driving healthcare organizations to seek us out for help are, number one, an increased expectations on the part of their consumers. Healthcare consumers, patients and families, their expectations go up every year. Number two, there's an increased pressure on healthcare organizations to do more than just clinical excellence. They've got to create a patient-centered experience, and we're experts at that. Patients' expectations are increasing every day because they have access to information. It's just a few clicks away. Not only that, but they have choices and they're well informed. So they can choose to move across city for the better experience. But they're only experts of what they know and understand. And then they'll judge you on what they don't know and understand. So for instance, my mother took us out to dinner when we were kids, 7 kids in a station wagon. And the way she decided on a restaurant was on the cleanliness of the restroom. She would decide on whether we were going to eat there or not based on how clean they kept the restroom. And I asked her, why was that so important? She says, well, if they don't take care of the restrooms, then they're probably not taking care of the kitchen. No one's taking care of my kids unless the restrooms are clean. And she was a nurse for almost 40 years, so she knew what she was talking about. Your patients are the same way. They are experts of cleanliness and friendliness, and then they'll judge you on everything else. Well, the pressure, number one, is coming out of Washington. I've spent the last 11 years convincing healthcare organizations this is the right thing to do. Now we've got some real skin in the game. Now Washington, whether the reform makes it or not, but if the healthcare reform goes through, they're tying patients' perception of their care rate to the reimbursement of Medicaid and Medicare. But you can't just rely on Medicaid and Medicare, which is 35 to 50% of some healthcare institutions' revenue. You've got to have a good payer mix. Why would somebody elect to go have surgery there? Why would somebody pay out of pocket for the exceptional emergency room experience? Also, we've got to make sure that we educate and inform and include non-clinical team members in the patient experience. What's the number one complaint? Attitude. What's the number two complaint? Noise. Amongst whom? Everybody. So we've got to educate dietitians, food service folks, security officers, and even the valet parker, because they're our first touch point. And either they're creating warm welcomes or cold interactions. They're all part of the care team and all part of the care experience. We've decided that patient-centered is not just a great buzzword, it's an increased desire of all healthcare organizations today. All of this is forcing healthcare organizations to put the patient truly in the center of everything they do. Patients are really calling the shots now. And this is a new concept for healthcare organizations. Not a new concept, but new that they really have to execute on it. Well, I can tell you what they shouldn't do. These Band-Aid approaches, corporate whack-a-mole, program of the month things, they just don't work. You've got to have an integrated approach. We've got to get everybody on the same page. We just talked about everybody has a role in the healing experience. That's not the question. The question is, what does it look like and sound like? Everybody has to have the same guiding compass. In our logo, you'll see it, True North. It's got to have alignment towards the same end in mind. And everybody's got to say, that's relevant to me in my job and my role. Once you do that, then you have consistency of the patient experience. Everybody who not only is doing it in their individual role, but the handoffs between team members, clinical and non-clinical team members, the patient goes, gosh, everybody's on the same page here. True North is simple, it's just not easy. Simple to develop, but not easy for people to operationalize. You got to make sure it's relevant to them. You got to develop an explicit culture where everybody says, I know what my role in the healing experience is, whether I'm off campus, on campus, backstage supporting other team members or not. When you do that, you not only create great patient experiences, but you create incredible pride among staff and staff engagement and loyalty. Well, you can't impose someone else's culture on your culture. It has to grow organically. You can't just bring in artificial turf and say, hey, this worked somewhere else, it's going to work here. If this thing does not grow organically within the organization, this too will pass. Part of our differentiator as an organization is we know the benchmarks that work not only within the retail or hospitality industry, but how they've been adapted and adopted to the healthcare industry. Our art, quite frankly, is getting the staff to say, this is how we need to create it. They'll own it and police it when the boss is not around. The peer pressure culture, if you will, is really what we're trying to get to, where everybody knows explicitly what the expectations and how to deliver them. We absolutely have a solution. We've got the blueprints to create world-class service cultures. There's no doubt. We just don't have a predetermined approach every time we go into an organization. We've got to make it their own. And the way we do that is we don't try to impose it on them, we try to release it from within. An example of that is the famous story of the sculptor Michelangelo. Here's a guy who spent weeks and maybe months carving this statue into King David. And people asked him, isn't it so wonderful that you can turn this rock into something so beautiful? And he said, turn it into something so beautiful, you don't understand. When I got this rock, I already saw David within. My job was not to turn it into anything, but to release David from the rubble. Our job at ILS, as the president of this company, I have the same philosophy. We don't come in and try to turn it into something different. We try to release the world-class service culture from within. Our job is to chip away at the barriers that are blocking that. One of the key elements is a decision-making process for all employees to have in their hip pocket. We call it the patient-centered priorities. What do I do first when I have conflicting priorities in the organization? Or I've got more than one patient to handle, or one or more employees that have me a question. Here's a great example. If you're up on a med-surg unit, they all have a unit secretary, unit clerk. They're always like air traffic controllers, you know? They've got people orbiting around them all the time. They've got a patient or three hitting a call bell. You got a patient on the phone who's discharged and they have questions about their care. You got a nurse tapping you on the shoulder who faxed something over to Walgreens. You got a physician looking for an electronic medical record or information. Who's more important? The patient in front of you, the patient in the room, the patient on the phone, or my two colleagues? They're all important. How do I have a decision-making filter to say, I know this is first, this is second, and this is third? Most organizations don't have that. That is a key element. Once you create this service promise, this new culture, true north, is it reflective in your onboarding process? How you recruit, how you select? Or is your onboarding process, your new employee orientation, just an information dump, or what we like to call the guest speaker death march? It's got to be imbued in there. Also, leaders have got to be held accountable. Leaders have got to be held accountable not only in their performance evaluation at the end of the year, but have weekly and monthly check-ins. What does it look like, sound like, and feel like? They've got to model it. Speaking of modeling it, we've got to be able to hardwire this into our daily routines and protocols. We call it the 4 C's. Leader, what are you communicating? What does it look like, sound like, and feel like in our area? 2, how are you going to celebrate it when you see it? 3, how are you going to coach it? And 4, how are you going to be able to measure or count it so that you know when the ball's moving? And if the ball moves, let's go back to the other C. How are we going to celebrate it? So that's another way we hardwire the process. Well, doctors are part of the providers, and providers are part of the care team. And I think there are 3 ways to get providers involved. Number 1, you can build it first, get the credibility and momentum, and then invite them later. 2, you can invite them to be part of the process. Or 3, which we found at one organization in New Orleans was the way to go, you get them to lead it. You get them to understand that it's going to save them time, it's going to maybe even save safety or quality or even lives. And it's going to make more money for the organization in the long run and them. And when they lead it, there's no greater testament to the organization that they're taking this seriously, and that if the physician, the provider, or the mid-level are leading it, then this has got teeth and it's got skin in the game. That's what I would do. From our experience with organizations that have attained that world-class status, like Disney, Ritz-Carlton, Starbucks Coffee, Southwest Airlines, we've been able to look critically through the customer's set of eyes and to be able to build operations around that customer-centric care. Same is true in healthcare. We've worked in healthcare now for the past 11 years. We've seen a lot of successes that we've applied and some successful failures, things we tried and didn't quite work. We're going to bring all that to the table for our clients. Not only outside world-class examples, but how to adapt and adopt it to our best practices and lessons learned. Oh, the key benefit for our clients is they don't have a second chance at this. The stakes are way too high. And they don't have time. Everybody's seen the research. Everybody's got a committee on the patient experience and they meet for an hour a month. Come on. We come in, we hardwire it into everything they do. Not just getting patient experiences up, but how do you hardwire it into the recruitment, selection, onboarding, accountability, the whole 9 yards. We save them the time, the energy, the money, and the effort. We do it full time, so we're not overburdening them. It's a fun part of the process. Exactly. That's why we're so privileged to help organizations operationalize this kind of patient-centered experiences. It drives success not only for the organization to create great patient experiences, but it differentiates them as a healthcare provider and a service provider in their community.